Hello, you're listening to a bonus episode of Popcorn Podcast with Leigh and Tim, where we're discussing Evil Dead Rise.
I'm Tim Ifland, movie buff.
And I'm Leigh Livingstone, entertainment journalist.
And we love to talk all things movies and can't wait to get into Evil Dead Rise, which is the latest installment in the long-running Evil Dead horror franchise, which tells the tale of two estranged sisters whose reunion is cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons. The sisters and their family are thrust into a primal battle for survival as they face down a mother of a nightmare.
Evil Dead Rise is written and directed by Lee Cronin of the horror The Hole in the Ground, and it stars Lily Sullivan, Alyssa Sutherland, Morgan Davies, Gabrielle Eccles, and Nell Fisher.
Now, I just want to open with this because apparently Evil Dead Rise was commissioned and meant to be on the streaming platform HBO Max.
Yes.
It wasn't going to get a theatrical release, but it tested so positively with test audiences that the distributor went, this has to go to cinemas.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that decision was made because it is such an experience, this movie, isn't it? Which we're going to get into. I just can't imagine sitting at home watching this for the first time.
Yeah, seeing this one on the big screen is certainly something else. Not least because the aesthetic of it is quite dark. It's designed to be quite dark. And I guess if you're watching it on a small screen, it's not going to hit you as well as some of those gorier moments do on the big screen.
Hit you, they do. Like they come through the screen.
Could you imagine if this was in 3D? How good would it have been in 3D?
I would be actually thinking that I needed to wipe the blood from my face if that was the case.
I'll give you a bit of background. So this Evil Dead franchise began in 1981 with Evil Dead. This is the fifth film in the series, and it really has a huge cult following, doesn't it?
A really dedicated cult following that have been following this series and all its iterations for, that's 40 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a
What
long
the
time.
hell? How is the early 80s now 40 years ago?
Oh, stop
How
it.
did we get here?
Stop it. So the franchise was rebooted in 2013 after quite a big break and distributed by Sony Pictures. And that reboot did moderately successfully, taking in $97 million from a budget of $17 million. It's not bad.
That's not a bad return.
Not bad for a sort of low budget horror.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's part of the economics of horror is that generally their budgets are quite tight and quite small and they pack a big punch and then they have a high return at the box office. So I'd be pretty happy with that return if my wallet was in the game.
These last two reboots, though, have moved away from some of that campy 80s horror humour that made the first film such a wild ride.
Yeah.
And they're going for more straight gore and pushing the boundaries of body horror. And then they push it even further in this film, don't they?
Look, we have seen the rise of body horror in horror movies probably from the last 20 years, especially when the Saw franchise came to be. That's like horror porn, though. I think that's a slightly different genre because you look away and don't want to look back. But in comparison to Evil Dead Rise, you look away, but you still want to glance back to see what else there is. I think that's the difference there.
To see how far they're going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
The difference in this story as well is this one puts the women front and centre of the story and introduces a family dynamic with kids, which I'm not sure has been done in these films before.
Oh, I don't think so.
No, which means, of course, you're going to get deadite kids being possessed. Like there's no way around it. You can't let the kids get off scot-free.
No one is safe.
No one is safe. Now, for those who aren't versed in this series, deadites are parasitic demons that feast on souls. And that's what happens throughout the films.
When you put it like that, it really just gives you a sense of what you're in for with this, that it feasts on their souls because it is really intense demonic possession in that way because how it plays out, and this isn't so unlike other movies, but there's a real emotional layer to this because there are times where the real person surfaces or makes themselves known. And whether or not that's been pushed forth intentionally by the demon just to fuck with people.
Yeah.
Or they're trying to escape to let them, I'm here, I'm real, but they're fucking shit up and they need to die because it's so unsafe. That just is a real intense layer of this movie.
Overall, when you walked out of this film, How did you feel? Because you're quite squirmy.
You're quite a pussy when it comes to horror movies.
Let's not beat around the bush.
Well, I had my fellow horror movie watching buddies in KT and OT from the For Your Reference podcast.
Yeah.
They were at the screening that I was at, so thank you. Shout out to you guys.
Did you end up in OT's lap?
No, not quite. Almost KT's lap. I think I held her hand once or a leg or something for some comfort. But do you know what? You'd be proud of me, and I think KT would back me up here, please, that I was okay. Like I did all right. Like there were some things where I had to audibly react to things. Like, you just can't help yourself. Jumps, yes, once or twice. But honestly, when I came out to answer your question, I just felt like I had a really good fucking time.
Yeah,
it's so entertaining. It's really confronting and full on. How did you feel when you saw it?
Well, some scenes definitely stayed with me. One involving a cheese grater.
Oh my God.
In particular.
I'm going to cautiously grate my cheese. I'm just going to think, this is the thing, I love grating cheese and putting it on my spag bowl. Now I'm going to always think back to that scene in this movie. It's not fair.
You know, if we've said it once, we've said it 1,000 times on this podcast, that fresh blood in a franchise can be fantastic. It can work really well.
Yep.
But the incoming filmmaker really has to understand the material, and they have to accept that the original creators need to be heavily involved, or at least consulted.
100%.
And the original creators still need to be collaborative enough to provide guidance without taking over.
Yes.
So it's all about putting those egos aside.
Yes.
Do you think that's been done successfully here?
I really do think so. Because there's that fresh perspective and really simple but effective things like we've seen in the Scream franchise recently, taking the action out of Woodsboro and putting it in New York City. Here, we're taking the franchise out of the cabin in the woods setup and putting it in this urban, decrepit world of LA. And that really works. It's still doing and saying the same thing, but giving it a fresh aesthetic and doing it well, which this movie does. It goes a long way and it elevates it where it needs to be in rehashing an IP that people are familiar with, but expecting something fresh.
I'm so glad you used Scream as an example, because that's where my brain goes as well, with Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett.
Yep.
Not even just the most recent one, Scream 6, where the setting is changed, but also the previous one. They really, really had a deep love for the material, and you could tell that it shone through on the screen. Yep. And I think that Leigh Cronin also does. He's been having all these conversations with the franchise producer Rob Tapert and the creator Sam Raimi. Like, we know...
Which is a name you're all familiar with.
We know Sam Raimi's track record in horror.
Yes.
He knows what he's doing. And even the star of the earlier films, Bruce Campbell, who played Ash, he's heavily involved in this as well.
Is he an executive producer in this?
He is.
Yeah, that's really nice because they're not trying to take over, like you said. They're there as consultants and championing and encouraging a new, fresh vision. And what you get is a product, a really slick and sharp product like Evil Dead Rise is. Yeah.
In terms of the story, we spoke briefly about how it's about a family, two sisters, Ellie, played by Alyssa Sutherland, and Beth, played by Lily Sullivan. Those names, interchangeable names. Both of them are Aussies. Let's hear it for the Aussies.
Oi, oi, oi.
They're playing sisters, and the underlying, tension between them is that, Ellie has 3 children. She's a bit of a free spirit, and she, wants a bit of the life that Beth has. And Beth's a roadie who's always on the road and having a great time and living up her best life.
Yes.
But maybe she wants a bit of Ellie's security.
Yeah. They're coming back into each other's lives after what seems like they've been estranged for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And each of them want a part of what they see as being a good part of their lives, but they're actually coming at a crossroads in their lives together. They're colliding, finding out things about each other that's happened over the last couple of years and trying to find a way, a vessel to communicate with each other and be open, only to be interrupted by possessive demons.
Yeah.
But that just adds a layer of complexity and character work that I wasn't expecting to see, because the first, what would you say, 15 or 20 minutes, we sit with the characters for a while. We get to know their tics, what their relationships like, their histories, where they're looking to head in their lives. And that just adds some complexity to how they interact with each other and the task at hand to save the day, if you will. It just adds some more depth to the story that you don't necessarily in a horror movie need to go down because there's so many other things to lean into.
Yeah, that's often falls by the wayside in horror films,
But
doesn't
not
it?
here, I don't think.
No?
Were you happy with how they set that up? Did it have enough weight behind it for you?
Yeah, it did for a horror film. Yeah, definitely. I think some people could say that it was a bit slow to get started, especially if you're going into a film like this really just wanting to get into the action and the horror and the gore. But I will say the opening sequence gives you that right off the bat.
Yeah. 100%.
So there is a sequence in the woods that gives you that jumping straight into the gore and the horror before you meet these characters.
You know, there's something so impactful about the opening titles.
Yes.
It's just how visual that was, and with the sound design and the music behind it.
They kind of rise out of the water, which is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a perfect opening. They wet your palate there with the gore and some of that tension. And then, yes, you do marinate in some character work for a while. But ultimately, I think it was needed and important because then it raises the stakes for later in the film from my perspective.
Yeah. You get invested in these characters.
Definitely.
And you want them to win. But, I mean, in these films,
does anyone win?
Does anybody win in these films? I don't know.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I know. I want to talk about Sutherland's physicality in this movie.
Oh, my gosh. Yep.
She's the possessed mother. There's no spoiler around that because it's in all the trailers. She's outstanding, really outstanding, so impressive. And when you think about how much of it was her in camera, because deadites can do some really physically impossible things with their bodies. They're not human anymore. And seeing her play that out physically was really impressive.
Now, you spoke to Lily Sullivan and Alyssa Sutherland, and one of the questions that you asked, and friends, you can listen to that interview episode now everywhere you get your podcast, and it's over on our YouTube channel as well. You asked how much of, your performance was CGI or whatever. She goes, no, it was all in camera, all that physicality. And when you get that insight into the performance, you're floored because she knew the assignment and she nailed it.
Oh, yeah. She beyond nailed it.
She beyond nailed it indeed. My gosh.
Sullivan is really kick-ass as well. We've been used to seeing her in more period kind of dramas like Picnic at Hanging Rock and all those kind of things. She, as we said, is Beth, who longs for the security of family that Ellie has. But she gets some really good Evil Dead moments, iconic moments that fans are really going to love.
She trades in corsets for chainsaws in this one, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what? I know you said that she's been around a while, but this is the beginning of something really special for her career. Like, she is an action star in the making.
Yeah.
I really can't wait to see how other ways she chooses to kick ass, because she's another one that knows the assignment and nails it.
Yeah, the two of them together were really fantastic.
Yeah, excellent.
And I don't think they knew each other before this film. I don't think they'd crossed paths. You know, this is an assumption that all Australians know each other. Such a small country.
That's true. Oh, yeah, you know Kate Blanchett? No, I don't. We don't know Kate Blanchett.
I've met Kate Blanchett, but no, I don't know her.
Oh, that's right. You have met her.
I have. There's a good story behind that too.
Yes.
For another time.
I remember.
Let's talk about the kids briefly. Okay, Morgan Davies, Gabrielle Eccles, who we've seen in Reminiscence previously, and Nell Fisher work really well together. And the two older actors really shine in the scarier moments.
Yeah. They've got lots to do as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the character of Danny, played by Morgan Davies, is the catalyst for the chaos that ensues. And he's grappling with a lot as a character based on the choices that he made. He's a curious young man. So, I don't blame him for when an earthquake hits that a sinkhole opens in the ground and he stumbles across a demonic book. I'm going to take that upstairs.
Oh, what's that? Let me have a look.
Oh, this looks interesting.
Let me read this out loud.
This says, do not open, basically, in every visual cue known to man. But I'm just going to open it anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
And then, you have Bridget, his sister. She attempts to be that protector. She's got great intuition. She's smart. She can see problems coming from a mile away. It's a really good dynamic between those two characters.
Yeah, and then you get Nell's character, Cassie, who's the youngest one, little innocent, playful, imaginative kid.
Cute.
But what's great about all these kids is that normally kids get sidelined in films like this.
Yeah.
Because, what are you going to do with them? Like, you can't torture children. That's just sick.
Well, hold my drink, says Evil Dead Ralph.
I know. But no, they really make use of them in this film and in some interesting and creative and horrifying ways. But, I will say, I want to clarify, it's not like torturing kid porn. Like it's,
Sure.
it's no.
No. It makes sense for the story.
It does make
if you
sense
will.
for the story. Yeah.
I always do wonder because I felt really impacted by the horrendous things that these kids were seeing and involved in. I was like, holy shit, these poor children. But then I always think back to what the experience would have been like for these children on set.
The way you were gesturing there, I was thinking, I think back to my own experiences with demons.
When my own father was demonically possessed in the mid-90s. No, sorry, Tony. He's all right.
I can't imagine that. Your dad's too nice.
He's too nice. What a gentleman. Shout out to Dad. Yeah, no, I just think about how, as a director, as producers, from a health and safety perspective, bring the kids back down to reality and let them know everything's okay. I just find that whole thing really interesting because this movie went places that would have really impacted anyone being involved, let alone kids.
Yeah, definitely. You take it with you, don't you?
Yeah.
As you see in my interview with Alyssa Sutherland, where she talks about that she'd maybe took a spirit with her into her hotel room.
No.
Nope, big nope.
Big nope.
Let's talk about the effects and the sort of set design and cinematography for a second. So the in-camera effects, they're really leaning heavily on that, and they're so brutal and so well done. And what's even more impressive when you see what unfolds, we're talking 6,500 litres of fake blood gushing from an elevator. From a practicality standpoint, like my mind is just blown how you pull that off.
Where do you begin?
I know.
Like, because surely that would be a one and done. You couldn't, all right, clean up on aisle 9, let's do that again.
Yeah.
It's casual 6,500 litres of blood.
Yeah, exactly.
Put that thing back where it came from, also help me.
Mop it up.
Mop it up. The intern, go.
There's limbs being thrown around, there's eyeballs being eaten, skulls ripped off, and as I mentioned, that particular scene with the cheese grater that had me squirming in my seat. Like, ooh.
Oh, the glass eating for me. The
glass eating, yeah.
I was like, because then there's enough there, the crunch, but then the swallow.
Ugh.
And I'm like,
and then it's poking through the neck as it goes down.
Damn. Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. But those in-camera effects are just really, really impressive when you think about how they had to have pulled it off. Like,
because you can't replicate that stuff effectively with CGI. You can do it and do it well, but there's something about it being real and tangible and visceral.
There's something about really swallowing glass that just
talks to me. Yeah.
We talked about the setting a little bit. What's really different in this film, as we said, is that it's set in a rundown LA apartment block instead of the spooky woods.
Yeah.
That's easy. That's been done to death. Spooky woods.
Cheating.
Exactly.
Cheating in the genre.
I give you LA apartment block. The new setting, as you said, gives filmmakers plenty to work with.
Yes.
And challenges because the setting is so confined.
Yes.
It's basically taking place in this one apartment, which is not a big apartment.
But it builds incredible tension, and the creative use of the camera that is done here really makes the space work for the story. And what you also have is a space that's lived in. When you compare it to a cabin in the woods, it's like, oh, you've just Airbnb'd it and there's nice pillows and cushions and throws and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got your suitcase there. This is a lived in space.
Yeah.
A family of 4. There's just different visual things that just add layers from a character perspective. And then also just how they maneuver in the space too.
Yeah, they're very squashed into this space. There's nowhere to hide, basically. There's nowhere to escape. And that adds a level of terror to the story and tension that just builds it up a bit more.
Totally.
And going back to how you said they have to get creative with filming to be able to pull this off, there's a really interesting set of sequences that's filmed through a peephole.
Yes.
Which I loved.
Wasn't that brilliant?
It was so good.
So good. I mean, there's something about a fisheye lens that screams, now bear with me, it screams like, oh, student film, because you're trying to be artsy and stuff. But the context in which that they use this fisheye lens is through the peephole in the door, and it works so effectively from a story and tension perspective because you are often missing what's happening.
Yes.
You're hearing it.
But you'll see something thrown across the frame.
Literally a body or a limb. And it's utterly terrifying, and it's a great framing for the story at that particular time in the film as well. And it just builds and builds beautifully. It's so good.
I did read that Lee Cronin didn't use very many of the same shots throughout the film. So creatively, it's really stretching what they can do and how they're presenting this film in different ways. It's very subtle because, you know, the average audience probably wouldn't notice that. It's just interesting that you would choose to do that and push every scene to be just creatively a little bit different.
Well, see, that's the thing. They're clearly pushing the envelope. They're trying to aim for these dizzy heights. And everything about this movie is so beautifully captured in all the creative aspects, the prosthetics, the makeup, the sound design, all that stuff, the cinematography, all these things we're talking about. It all just works together at the highest level. You get a great product. One of my favorite shots, and they only did this thing once to great effect. You're in the corridor outside the door and the demon is like going from the roof or the side of the wall onto the floor, and the camera tilts with it.
Yes.
And it's like you move with it.
Yeah.
But they only do it once. They don't overuse it.
Yes.
And it's like, fuck, that was good. That was one of the visual things, those moments that have stayed with me because it was used so effectively.
Oh, God, you just reminded me of towards the end of the film and what happens. I'm just like, just when you think it can't get any crazier, it can't get any worse, then...
Do you want a cool flannel for your forehead?
Lee Cronin's like, hold my beer.
Yes.
I'm going to up the stakes here.
Up the stakes he does.
The makeup and design of the costuming, again, levels up because the characters have to go through different stages of the demonization.
Sure.
And because so much is done in camera, like you just think about the sheer volume of costumes that need to be in various states of bloodiness or distress or torn or whatever.
That's such a good point.
And same with the makeup because especially Alyssa Sutherland's makeup changes and her prosthetics change throughout the film very incrementally. So you might not even notice it until there's a big difference at the end.
Yeah.
And I think poor Alyssa Sutherland was in the makeup chair for like 6 hours, like a full work day before she even got on set.
That honestly always blows my mind about filmmaking is what actors endure and put themselves through to reach an aesthetic or a look for them to be able to do their character justice and to deliver something for the audience. That's astounding.
Yeah, you'd just as well go home in the makeup, wouldn't you? I can't be bothered getting up at 2 a.m. tomorrow. Can we just leave it on? I'll just sleep in it.
Imagine if I just did the scenario that you come home from a day's work as a demon and you don't wipe it off and your partner's in bed with you and they were already asleep, so they're not aware, and they wake up to see you like asleep looking like death.
Yeah.
Is this my sleep paralysis demon moment? Like, fuck, that'd be intense.
You would have a heart attack waking up next to that.
That would be my end.
It would be the end of Tim.
That's where I would die. In my bed.
Fans will notice that there's a new design for that famous Book of the Dead too. This version is more alive. It's got skin and arteries and something that looks like a dead cat carcass on the spine.
I actually feel physically unwell. Those teeth.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's impressive though.
It is impressive. It really, really makes it clear that the shit that's in this book is going to fuck you up.
Why would you open it, Danny? Why would you open it?
Danny boy.
We'd have no story if you didn't.
We'd have no story. We wouldn't have an episode. So thanks for opening the book, Danny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it screams like, I'm a bad, bad book in its design.
I'm a naughty book.
I'm a naughty book.
Open me for death.
Flip to page 50 for some nastiness.
We're turning into a phone sex hotline.
Call 555 nasty book. Now.
For your impending doom.
Yes. Oh, God.
On that note, should we wrap up our review of Evil Dead Rise?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, Evil Dead Rise is almost like another reboot for the series, I think, in that it's that little bit closer to nailing everything fans of the franchise love while still being a fresh take on the whole concept. It's gory, it's brutal, it's one hell of a good time for horror fans. I'm giving it 4 popcorn kernels out of 5.
Hey, love that. Well, Evil Dead Rise is a slick and beautifully shot horror that will tick all the boxes for fans of the genre and Evil Dead franchise. This one surprised me. Despite the hype going in, it still grabbed me from the beginning to end and took me on an intense ride I didn't want to get off. It's not for the faint of heart, but with an R rating and its horror pedigree behind it, you should be somewhat prepared for what's to come. A violent, gory romp full of satisfying body horror and badass performances that elicit visceral reactions over and over. I'm also going to rate Evil Dead Rise 4 popcorn kernels, Leigh.
Well, there you have it. Evil Dead Rise is in Australian cinemas from April 20. And be sure to head over to YouTube and check out our interview with the stars of the movie, Alyssa Sutherland and Leigh Sullivan. And you can also hear that wherever you get your podcasts.
That's right. Leigh,
Yeah.
we announced last week
Yes.
that you and your husband, Ollie, were going to have a baby,
Yes.
which is just wonderful.
Well, I'm
news.
having the baby.
Yeah, Ollie is not pregnant as
Ollie
well.
is supporting me in that.
It's like a Arnold Schwarzenegger Jr. scenario.
Yeah.
This marks Evil Dead Rise. This episode marks the last episode
Yes.
we're going to be recording together for a while.
We thought it would be Mafia Mama, but we squeezed one more in.
We just had to.
Yeah.
This movie begged to be talked about.
We had
so
to,
I hope you've enjoyed this chat. But while Leigh's away, I'll be bringing you Popcorn Pals, which is our spin-off series. I'll be joined by other friends within the podcast network. We're going to be talking all things new release movies, so watch out for that.
And I'll be back later in the year. You can't get rid of me that easily.
Definitely will, my friend. Well, as always, friends, thank you so much for listening.
We'll catch you next time. We have a website, popcornpodcast.com. Make sure you check it out. We've got all our episodes up there for you to listen to.
If you'd like to get to know us a little better, there's an About Us section, and we run ticket giveaways. So keep an eye on the website for more information.